Hello, my dear students. Welcome to Sankalp learning classes. So this is the second session of the human reproduction chapter, right? So in the last class, we have started the discussion on the chapter human reproduction. So already we have discussed about the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system and the process of formation of the gametes. So mainly we have discussed about the spermatogenesis ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಸ್ಪರ್ಮ್ಯಾಟೋಜೆನೆಸಿಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಹಾಗೆ ಮೇಲ್ ರಿಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಫಿಮೇಲ್ ರಿಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ದಿಸ್ ಸೆಷನ್ ಸ್ಪೆಷಲಿ we are going to study about the oogenesis. Oogenesis ಹೇಗಾಗತ್ತೆ, then the fertilization, how the fertilization occurs, then post-fertilization events. So after the fertilization, what are the changes? What are the changes occurs in the zygote ಏನಾಗಿ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ ಅಸ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ವಿತ್ ದ oogenesis. ಓಕೆ. Oogenesis. So what is oogenesis? The process of formation of mature female gamete is called oogenesis. Alva? So what is the definition of the oogenesis? The process of formation of mature female gamete. So that is called as the oogenesis process. Then oogenesis is initiated during the embryonic development stage when the couple of million gamete mother cells oogonia are formed within the each fetal ovary. No more oogonia are formed and added after the birth. So this is very important thing, so that we should know. Oogenesis. So spermatogenesis initiated after the puberty, right? Puberty ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸ್ಪರ್ಮ್ಯಾಟೋಜೆನೆಸಿಸ್, ಸ್ಪರ್ಮ್ಯಾಟೋಗೋನಿಯಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ oogenesis process ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಆದ್ರೆ this oogenesis process that is initiated during the embryonic developmental stage. So when it is there when the female baby embryo that is there in the mother's body, the oogenesis process that is initiated. Okay. So no more the oogonias, so that will start formation inside the ovary. So oogonial cells ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, so that start to form inside the ovary, and no more oogonia are formed and added after the birth. Okay. So oogonial cells, they are formed before the birth. So that is the very important thing in the oogenesis process. Then oogonia cells means mother cells start division and enter into the prophase 1 of the meiotic division and get exemplary. So then they get the temporarily arrested at the stage called primary oocytes. Okay. So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ oogonial cells formation ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. oogonial cells formation ಆಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಈ oogonial cells ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, so they start the cell division, they start the meiotic cell division ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. meiotic cell division. So in the meiotic cell division ಏನಾಗತ್ತೆ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ meiosis 1 ಅಂತ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. meiosis 1 and the meiosis 2 ಅಂತ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. meiosis 2 ಅಂತ ಆಗತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ meiosis 1 ಅಲ್ಲಿ prophase 1, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase 1 ಅಂತ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಹಾಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ meiosis 2 ದಲ್ಲೂ ಪ್ರೋಪೇಸ್ 1, ಮೆಟಾಫೇಸ್ 1, ಅನಾಫೇಸ್, ಟೆಲೋಫೇಸ್ 2 ಅಂತ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಮಿಯೋಸಿಸ್ 1 ಮತ್ತೆ 2. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೋಪೇಸ್ 1 ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸ್ಟೇಜಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೋಪೇಸ್ 1 ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಊಗೋನಿಯಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಏನಿದೆ, ಸೊ ದಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಗೋ ದ ಮಿಯೋಟಿಕ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್. ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಊಗೋನಿಯಲ್ ಸೆಲ್. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಗೋ ದ ಮಿಯೋಟಿಕ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್, ಬಟ್ it is halted, that is temporarily arrested at the stage of propase 1 stage. Okay, so it is arrested at the stage of propase 1 stage alli aden agbidutte, arrest agbidutte. Okay, so let us see what happens next. Each primary oocyte, so here oocyte then gets surrounded by layer of granulosa cells, and it is called as the primary follicle. A large number of these follicles degenerate during the phase of birth to the puberty. Therefore, at the puberty, only 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles are left in each ovary. So, primary follicles estirutte around 60,000 to 80,000 that will remain in each ovary. Nodi, the primary follicles get surrounded by more layers of granulosa cells and a new theca and are called secondary follicles. Nodi illi primary oocyte ide. This primary oocyte that is surrounded by, so like this, it is surrounded by layer of cells that is called as a granulosa cells and a new theca and are called secondary follicles. The secondary follicles soon transform into tertiary follicles, which is characterized by a fluid filled cavity called antrum. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ದ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte ಒಳಗಡೆ ಏನಿದೆ, ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte. ಸೊ ಇದು ಗ್ರಾನುಲೋಸಾ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ನೋಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ವಿಚ್ ಇಸ್ ಸರೌಂಡೆಡ್ ದ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte, that is the primary follicle. And here again the layer of cells that is formed around the primary, that is the secondary follicle. Then it will develop into a tertiary follicle. So ಈ tertiary follicle ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, this is the tertiary follicle. So there is a cavity is formed alva. So that is covered by more layer of granulosa cells and there is a cavity. That cavity is called as the antrum. The theca layer is organized into an inner theca interna and outer theca externa. So theca layers irutte, that is called as theca interna, and that is, and the another one is the theca externa. The primary oocyte within the tertiary follicles grows in size and completes its first meiotic division. ಈ primary oocyte ಏನ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, so ಅದು ಅರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅರೆಸ್ಟೆಡ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಮಿಯೋಸಿಸ್ 1 ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ, ಪ್ರೋಪೇಸ್ 1 ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಅರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಅಲ್ವಾ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte. ಆ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಗ್ರಾನುಲೋಸಾ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ದೆನ್ ದ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte that completes that undergo the maturation and that completes the follicle grows in size and completes its first meiotic division. Nodi enagta ide, so this is the oogonial cell. So this oogonial cell that will undergo the first meiotic division. So that completes the first meiotic division. Okay, so oogonial cell enagittu, that is arrested at the meiosis 1 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ that is the so that completes the meiosis 1. So meiosis first meiotic division complete ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, it is an unequal division resulting in the formation of large haploid secondary oocyte and tiny ಪೋಲಾರ್ ಬಾಡಿ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಒಂದು ಪೋಲಾರ್ ಬಾಡಿ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸೊ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ oocyte ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ oocyte. ಅಗೇನ್ ದಿ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ oocyte that will undergo the division after that. Okay, so illéನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಮಿಯೋಟಿಕ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್ ಆಗಿ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, so that completes the first meiotic division, and the secondary oocyte retains the bulk of the nutrient rich cytoplasm of the primary oocyte. ಈಗ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ ನೋಡಿ, so this is the primary oocyte. So that is the oogonial cell that will develop into a primary oocyte agi develop ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. So the oogonial cell that will develop into a primary oocyte, and this primary oocyte that is arrested in the meiosis 1 stage ಅಲ್ಲಿ, meiosis 1 ಅಲ್ಲಿ arrest ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. Then the layer of follicle cells are developed around the primary follicles. Then it will develop into a secondary follicle and the tertiary follicle, then into a Graafian follicle, and the primary oocyte that completes the first meiotic division. First meiotic ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಅದು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, so that will develop into a secondary oocyte. The tertiary follicle further changes into a mature follicle and the Graafian follicle. So tertiary follicle ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ನೋಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ, tertiary follicle ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, so that will develop into a mature Graafian follicle, and the secondary oocyte forms a new membrane called zona pellucida surrounding it, and the Graafian follicle now ruptures and release the secondary oocyte from the ovary by the process ovulation. So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, so secondary oocyte, so that is released from the Graafian follicle, so that is the process, so that is the ovulation process. So this is the oogenesis, how the oogenesis takes place. So this is the schematic representation of the oogenesis. ನೋಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ oogenesis ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, oogonial cells. So this is the mitosis division. So first step, oogonial cells are formed within the ovary. It increases, oogonial cell increases its number by the mitosis cell division. So oogonial cell that is diploid in condition. So these all are the diploid cells. Here the multiplication of the oogonial cells takes place. Okay, so when it takes place in the fetal body. The oogonial cells, they increase their number in the fetal body only, not after the birth. ಸೊ ಬರ್ತ್ ಆಗೋಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇರತ್ತೆ, ಈ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಓವರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇರತ್ತೆ ನೋಡಿ. ಈಗ ಇಷ್ಟು ooganial cell formation ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಸೊ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ದ ಬರ್ತ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಇಟ್ ರಿಮೇನ್ಸ್ ಸೇಮ್. ಎಷ್ಟು ooganial cells formation ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ooganial cells ಆಡ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ದ ooganial cells, they increase their number by mitosis cell division. So these all are diploid in condition, and in the fetal so next ಏನಾಗತ್ತೆ, so one of this, just imagine, so this is the primary oocyte, so that will develop into a, so that will undergo the maturation, one of the oogonial cell that will undergo the maturation, and it will become primary oocyte. Okay, so it will increase its number by mitosis cell division, and one of the oogonial cell that will become primary oocyte. And this primary oocyte, so that will undergo the meiosis 1, but the meiosis 1, so that is halted in the fetal. So there is no the completion of this cell division takes place after the birth. So before the birth only, so this cell division is halted like this. Okay, then this primary oocyte, so what happens to this primary oocyte, the granulosa cells are formed and Graafian follicle is formed. So that takes place after the birth. So then birth to the puberty, so it is remain halt till puberty. ಎಲ್ಲಿ ತನಕ ಮಿಯೋಸಿಸ್ 1 ಹಾಗೆ ಹಾಲ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ಸೊ ಮಿಯೋಸಿಸ್ 1 is halted till ಪ್ಯೂಬರ್ಟಿ, ಬರ್ತ್ ಇಂದ ಪ್ಯೂಬರ್ಟಿ ವರೆಗೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಮಿಯೋಸಿಸ್ 1 ಹಾಲ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಬರ್ತ್ ಟು ದ ಪ್ಯೂಬರ್ಟಿ, ಚೈಲ್ಡ್ಹುಡ್ ಆಯ್ತು, ಪ್ಯೂಬರ್ಟಿ ವರೆಗೆ ಹಾಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ದ ಪ್ಯೂಬರ್ಟಿ ಇಟ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ಸ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte completes its cell division. So this is the primary oocyte that completes its cell division and become two secondary oocytes. Sorry, one polar body, this is the polar body, and the secondary oocyte. Okay, so this secondary oocyte, so that produces the ovum. So that completes the second meiotic division. So the first meiotic division and the second meiotic division completes, and which forms the ovum. Ovum release ಆಯ್ತು ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ only one ovum is released from the one primary oocyte. ಇಲ್ಲಿ primary oocyte ನೋಡಿ, so that is halted. So that is the difference. ಏನ್ ನೀವು ಸ್ಪರ್ಮ್ಯಾಟೋಜೆನೆಸಿಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ತರ ಏನು ಇದನ್ನ ನೋಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಏನಾಗಿರತ್ತೆ, cells mitosis ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, next meiosis complete ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. But here the polar bodies are formed here after the first meiotic division, and after the second meiotic division also one polar body is formed here, second polar body. So only one ovum is released from the one primary oocyte. So that is the main difference between the 4 sperms formation agittu alva, spermatozoa formation agittu spermatogenesis alli, but illi only one ovum production agide, and there is no first meiotic division, so that is halted in the spermatogenesis. But oogenesis alli enagirutte, first meiotic division ಹಾಲ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ದಿ ಪ್ಯೂಬರ್ಟಿ ಅದೇನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದು ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಮೇನ್ ಡಿಫರೆನ್ಸ್ in between the spermatogenesis and the oogenesis. So ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ತೇನೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್, ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಟರ್ಷರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಟರ್ಷರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಈ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್, ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಟರ್ಷರಿ ಫಾಲಿಕಲ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಆ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ oocyte ಸುತ್ತ ಲೇಯರ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ that we call as a primary follicle, secondary follicle, and the tertiary follicle. Okay, so that is about the oogenesis. ಈ schematic representation ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. Yes. Let us see the video about oogenesis.
Oogenesis, production of egg. The production of egg in the female reproduction organ, the ovary, is called oogenesis. The production of reproductive cells in females occurs during certain periods. The eggs are protected and nourished by the ovary. There are a large number of follicles in the ovary. There is one primary oocyte in every follicle. Every month, one egg cell matures and is released into the fallopian tube to allow fertilization to occur. The eggs are formed from the 2-end parent cell found in the ovaries of the reproductive system. These cells are called oogonium. The eggs begin development from the 3rd month, when the female is still in the uterus of its mother, and continues until it reaches a certain age. The oogonium multiplies through mitosis before the female reaches puberty. The oogonium grow and develop to prepare for meiosis. These cells are called primary oocytes. In contrast with sperm production, during the production of eggs, meiosis produces one mature gamete. The 2N chromosome parent cell, oogonium, produces 2N chromosome cells after meiosis 1. Of these, the small one is called first pole cell, while the large is called the secondary oocyte. As the cells complete meiosis II, 3 small pole cells and 1 ootid with a large cytoplasm is formed.
It means that is the ovum. Okay. So remaining all the polar bodies formation agutte.
The pole cells produced during division disappear by dissolving. However, the ootid differentiates to form a mature egg cell. The purpose of meiosis during egg formation is to halve the number of chromosomes.
So here the ovum that is also haploid. ನಿಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ meiosis ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಆ ಒಂದು cells formation ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, that is the haploid in number. Okay. So next, so how the hormones, so they act role in the oogenesis. Hormone role in the oogenesis. So the hypothalamus that produces the gonadotropin releasing hormone, and this gonadotropin releasing hormone that is able to that produces the that stimulate the anterior lobe of the pituitary. This gonadotropin releasing hormone GnRH that stimulate the anterior lobe of pituitary, and pituitary releases the FSH and the LH. So FSH, so that is helpful for the formation of Graafian follicles and growth of the follicles within the ovary. Follicles development agutte alva, so that is responsible by the follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone that acts on the ovary, and that also help for the ovulation process. Release of the secondary oocyte from the ovary. The ovulation process that is also induced by the luteinizing hormone. Okay. After the ovulation, the remaining of the Graafian follicle that is called as the corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum that produces the hormone progesterone hormone. Okay. And the growing follicles that releases the hormone estrogen. The growth of the follicles, the growing follicles, they releases the hormone that is called as the estrogen hormone. So menstrual cycle. So one of the important topic, menstrual cycle. What is menstrual cycle? The female reproductive system passes through the regular monthly sequential event. So that is called as a menstrual cycle. It begins at the puberty and it halt at the age of 50, around 50. So that is called as menopause. So when it begins, the first menstrual cycle that is called as menarche. The first menstrual cycle that is called menarche, and the halt of the menstrual cycle that is called as a menopause. Okay. And menstrual cycle ranges between 22 to 28 days, around 22 to 28 days. During this period, changes takes place in the ovary and the endometrium of the uterus. Mainly the endometrium of the uterus that is responsible for the menstrual cycle, and hormonal changes that occurs in the ovary that is also responsible for it. Here, you know that our uterus that is made up of 3 wall layers, that is outer layer, that is the perimetrium, and middle layer, that is the myometrium, and the innermost layer, that is the endometrium. Perimetrium, myometrium, and the endometrium is the innermost layer. So that is the 3 wall layers of the uterus. The uterus is the site of the menstruation. It consists of 3 layers tissues: outer perimetrium, middle myometrium, and the inner endometrium layer. The endometrium consists of 2 layers of stratum basalis, and the stratum function is shed during the menstruation. So the endometrium layer, so that shed during the So the layer of the endometrium that shed during the menstrual cycle, that comes in the form of mucus and the blood. So that is called as the menstrual cycle. Here, so there are four different phases of the menstrual cycle. Let us see the four different phases of the menstrual cycle. The first one is first phase of menstrual cycle. Menstrual phase is the first phase of menstrual cycle, and in this phase menstrual flow occurs, means menstruation, that is the mucus and blood comes out through the vagina, that is the menstrual phase, and it lasts for 3 to 5 days. The menstrual phase that continue up to 3 to 5 days. Then breakdown of the endometrial lining and the blood vessels, mucus and blood comes out through the vagina. That is the main thing of this menstrual phase, and it occurs only when the ovum is released but no fertilization. When the fertilization not occurs in the female body, then only the menstrual phase occurs. If the fertilization is occurred, then lack of menstruation is the indication of the pregnancy. If the fertilization occurs, then there is no menstrual cycle. The second phase is the follicular phase. So what is the follicular phase here? Menstrual phase followed by the follicular phase. Primary follicles becomes Graafian follicles. Then regeneration of proliferation of uterine endometrium. Here the uterus here menstrual phase followed by the follicular phase. Menstrual phase next ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, follicular phase start ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So primary follicles become Graafian follicles. Primary follicles in develop ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, around the primary oocytes, they develop into a Graafian follicle, that is the mature follicle. And regeneration and proliferation of the uterine endometrium, again the uterine endometrium forms inside the uterus, and LH and FSH, luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone level increases gradually in the follicular phase. So follicular phase ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, LH ಮತ್ತೆ FSH, LH ಮತ್ತೆ FSH ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, they gradually increase in that time. And level of estrogen increases as it is secreted from the growing follicle. So estrogen kuda ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Estrogen ಯಾವುದರಿಂದ secrete ಆಗ್ತಿತ್ತು, estrogen that is secreted by the growing follicles ಅಲ್ವಾ. Growing follicles ಇಂದ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, estrogen secrete ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. It lasts for 5 to 13 days. So this follicular phase that lasts for 5 to 13 days. So LH ಮತ್ತೆ FSH ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, so that increases, so that level increases, and estrogen kuda secrete ಆಗುತ್ತೆ from the growing follicles. Then ovulatory phase. So when the FSH and LH attain the peak level in this period, so FSH ಮತ್ತೆ LH ಆವಾಗ peak level ಗೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, so that increase its level, then this is called as a LH surge. What is LH surge? FSH and the LH attain the peak level in this period, that is on the 14th day. So this is called as LH surge, which induces the rupture of the Graafian follicle and release of the ovum from the ovary, called ovulation. So that process is called as the ovulation. And the last one, luteal phase. So after the rupture of the Graafian follicle rupture agi ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, so ovulation ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. So the remaining of the Graafian follicle transfer into corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum is formed, and corpus luteum produces the large amount of the progesterone. That corpus luteum that is able to produce the large amount of the progesterone, and progesterone maintains the uterine endometrium and prepares it for the implantation. Progesterone that help for the, that is also called as the pregnancy hormone, that prepares the uterine endometrium for the implantation. Thickness of the uterine of the endometrium increases in many folds due to the proliferation. The endometrium again that is formed. So these are the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. Very important.
The menstrual cycle begins with menstrual bleeding, marking the follicular phase's first day.
Just see
When the
video.
follicular phase begins, levels of estrogen and progesterone are low. As a result, the top layer of the uterus's thickened lining break down and are shed, and menstrual bleeding occurs. About this time, the pituitary gland starts sending follicle-stimulating hormones to your ovaries, stimulating the development of 5 to 20 follicles in the ovaries. Each follicle contains an immature egg and produces estrogen. One follicle will soon begin to grow faster than others. This is called the dominant follicle. As the follicle grows, the levels of estrogen in the blood rise significantly. This increase in estrogen begins to inhibit the secretion of the follicle-stimulating hormone. The fall in follicle-stimulating hormone allows smaller follicles to die off. They are, in effect, starved of follicle-stimulating hormone. The increasing amount of estrogen in your body also ensures that the lining of your womb thickens with nutrients and blood. This is so that if you do get pregnant, the fertilized egg will have everything it needs to grow. The ovulatory phase begins with a rise in the levels of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. The surge of the luteinizing hormone triggers one of the most prominent follicles to pop open and release its egg, which heads into the fallopian tube and starts its journey towards the uterus. Ovulation usually occurs 16 to 32 hours after the beginning of the surge, around day 14 of the menstrual cycle. During the luteal phase, the levels of the luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone decrease. The ruptured follicle closes after releasing the egg and forms a
Yellow color
corpus
structure, that is
luteum,
the corpus
which produces estrogen and progesterone, which causes the lining of the uterus to thicken even more. If an egg is fertilized, progesterone supports early pregnancy. But if no fertilization occurs, the corpus luteum will break down between 9 and 11 days after ovulation. This results in a drop in estrogen and progesterone levels, bringing us back to the first stage of menstruation if no pregnancy has occurred. Thank you for watching this video. Please watch my other videos.
So this is the menstrual cycle. So follicular phase, ovulatory phase, luteal phase and the menstrual phase. So these are the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle and very important. So which hormone increases in which level and which causes the menstrual cycle. So these all things are very important for your exam. Next thing is fertilization. So already we know that the male gamete, how the male gamete is formed, that is the spermatogenesis process and the oogenesis process. So these both things we have studied. Now it is the time to study about the fertilization in human. You know the meaning of the fertilization. Fertilization andre enagatte, fusion of the male and female gametes takes place, that is the fertilization. So here the process of union of haploid sperm and the haploid ovum to form the diploid zygote is called as the fertilization. So diploid zygote is formed, that is called as the fertilization. Where the fertilization occurs? So mainly in the fallopian tube. The fertilization that occurs in the fallopian tube. Duration, it occurs within the 24 hours of the ovulation. It occurs within the 24 hours of the ovulation. Yes, this is how the sperms fuse with the egg. So that is the fertilization. Then during the sexual intercourse, 300 million sperms are introduced in the vagina. Only hundreds of them reach the ovum. So millions of sperms are released from the male reproductive system and which reach the vagina. Then only around 100 sperms that reach the ovum. So here there is a ovum. So this is the ovum and this is the sperm. So layers of the ovum. Ovum is surrounded by gelatinous zona pellucida, a corona radiata and the cumulus ooporous layer. The ovum that is surrounded by the zona pellucida. So this is the zona pellucida layer. Then the corona radiata, this is the outer layer. The follicle cells of the corona radiata and the cumulus ooporous layer. Okay. Then a sperm has penetrated through these all three layers. The sperm that should enter when it meet the sperm ovum, so it should break down all these layers, then it should enter then it should meet the ovum. Okay. So there is a word capacitation. To penetrate through these all layers, a sperm has to undergo the certain physiological changes called sperm activation or capacitation. Here, so let us see the video. After that, I will give the explanation. Okay. So the fertilization. Let us see how the
Fertilization in
occurs.
humans is internal. It takes
Internal
place inside the
fertilization.
body of the female. Semen, which contains the sperms, is introduced into the female genital tract during the act of copulation.
During
The
the
deposition of
copulation,
sperms in the
semen
vagina is called
introduced
insemination.
into the vagina. See, these
Human
all
sperms are
sperm.
motile and rapidly swim towards the ovum, lying in the fallopian tube. The sperms pass the
To the
cervix,
fallopian tube.
enter the uterus, and finally reach the ampullary isthmic junction of the fallopian tube.
Ampullary isthmic
This is the
junction.
site where the ovum lies and fertilization takes place. When a sperm meets the ovum is in the secondary oocyte
The
stage.
ovum is the secondary
It has
oocyte
not yet
stage.
completed its second meiotic division. The fusion of sperm and ovum is called fertilization. For fertilization to take place, the sperms must be released in the vagina during the period that the egg is alive, that is, within 24 hours
That is
after
entering
ovulation.
into
The sperm has to pass through the corona radiata and the zona pellucida to reach the plasma membrane of the ovum.
corona radiata layer to reach the egg.
When it reaches the zona pellucida, the acrosome releases its contents of lytic enzymes. These enzymes dissolve the zona
Acrosome that helps
pellucida.
for the penetration.
The sperm plasma membrane then fuses with the egg plasma membrane.
Acrolytic enzymes
This
that help
fusion
for
triggers the secondary oocyte to complete its second meiotic division. The second meiotic division is also unequal and leads to the formation of a second polar body and a haploid ovum. The nucleus of the ovum is now called the female pronucleus. The cortical granules present below the egg plasma membrane release enzymes which harden the zona pellucida and block further entry of sperms.
only one sperm is able
The
to
sperm
enter
nucleus
inside the
now
ovum.
enters the
Okay.
cytoplasm of the ovum. The sperm nucleus is now termed the male pronucleus. The male and female pronuclei come together and fuse.
So the male and female.
The male and
is
female
that-
chromosomes mix. This event is called karyogamy or amphimixis. Fertilization is thus completed. The fertilized ovum is called the zygote. Identical twins are formed when the zygote splits into two. Each split portion then develops into a complete new individual, and both are exactly identical to each other. On the other hand, non-identical or fraternal twins are
Identical
formed
twins,
when
they are
two
formed by
separate
the
eggs develop in the mother's
division
body,
of the
and they get
zygote.
fertilized by two separate sperms.
So here, what is the significance of the fertilization? So the restoration of the diploidy. So when the haploid gametes, they fuse and form the diploid zygote, and recombination of the genes. So see here, the male genes. So the male gametes, sperms, they contain the male genes, and the ovum that contains the female genes, right? So they all together fuse and form the zygote. So here the recombination of the genes occurs, and introduction of the sperm centriole and activation of the ovum. So ovum get activated when the sperm enter into the uh, ovum, and increase in the metabolic activity of the ovum, and which establishes the definite polarity in the ovum. So that is the significance of the fertilization here. So post-fertilization in human. Yes, now the fertilization occurred. Male and female gametes, they are fused. One male gamete and the female gamete, they are fused. Then what happens after the fertilization in the fallopian tube? So in the fallopian tube, the cleavage and formation of the morula. What is morula? The zygote undergoes the cleavage. It trickles down the uterine tube. The first cleavage is completed about 36 hours after the fertilization. Nodi zygote ide. Ee zygote enagutte, so that will start the mitotic cell division. So 2 cell stage and 4 cell stage, 16 cell stage. So ಈ ತರ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, cells ಈ ತರ divide ಆಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. Cells increase their number. Okay, so zygote that will undergo the cleavage. Further cleavage result in the formation of the solid 8 to 16 cell blastomere. So these cells which are formed, they are called as blastomere. Okay, daughter cells which are formed, that is called as the blastomeres. And 8 to 16 stage blastomere, so that is called as the morula. What is morula? 8 to 16 blastomeres are called morula, which is enclosed by a zona pellucida layer. And formation of the blastocyst. In morula, this is the 8 to 16 stage morula, then it will undergo the 32 cell stage, and this morula that will develop into blastocyst. After reaching the uterus, morula floats freely in the uterine fluid. Meanwhile, the cavity develops in the morula and transforms into a hollow ball that is called as a blastocyst. Blastocyst yav tara irutte andre, so the cells like this, and there will be a cavity. Show. So there is a cavity that is called as blastocele. Okay, the blastocyst that is differentiated into outer layer of cells called tropoblast layer. So the outer layer of cells that is called as a tropoblast, and inner cell mass that is the embryoblast, and the fluid filled cavity that is known as the blastocele. Just a minute, I will show the diagram. Yes, here. So this is the fertilization. After the fertilization, the zygote start cleavage and 4 cell stage, and this is the morula stage. Right. So this morula that is implanted. So this is the morula that is implanted inside the uterus. This is the uterus part. So uterus alli enagta ide nodi. So here this morula, so where the arrangement of the cells takes place. Cells yav riti arrange agatte andre, there is a outer layer of cells, so that is called as a tropoblast layer, and there is a layer of cells which are present inside, that is called as the inner cell mass, and this cavity that is called as a blastocele, and the morula that will undergo the blastocyst formation. Okay, and blastocyst that is implanted in the uterus endometrium ಗೆ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ಈ blastocyst attach ಆಗಿದೆ. Here, formation of the blastocyst. Simultaneous to the formation of blastocyst, the endometrium of the uterine wall becomes thick and highly vascular and prepares itself to receive the blastocyst. This preparation takes place under the influence of the hormone progesterone. So this progesterone hormone that help for the preparation of the endometrium for the attachment of the blastocyst. ಈ blastocyst ಇಲ್ಲಿ attach ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಲ್ವಾ, so the endometrium should get ready for that. So the progesterone hormone that help for that preparation of the uterus, and the blastocyst remains uterine cavity for about 2 to 3 days and then attaches itself to the uterine wall. This process is called as the implantation. What is implantation? The blastocyst which is attached to the walls of the uterine endometrium of the uterine, that process, that attachment, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅಟ್ಯಾಚ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಅಟ್ಯಾಚಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ಏನಂತಾರೆ, ಇಂಪ್ಲಾಂಟೇಶನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೀತಾರೆ. ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಬ್ಲಾಸ್ಟೋಸಿಸ್ಟ್? ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಬ್ಲಾಸ್ಟೋಸಿಸ್ಟ್? ಸೊ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಮೊರುಲಾ ಯಾವ ತರ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ದೆನ್ ಹೌ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿಕಮ್ ಬ್ಲಾಸ್ಟೋಸಿಸ್ಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದ ಇಂಪ್ಲಾಂಟೇಶನ್, ವೆರಿ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ implantation process. Okay, so this process takes place after the post fertilization. Blastocyst ಏನಾಗಿದೆ, ಅಟ್ಯಾಚ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. Then implantation, the process of embedding of blastocyst into the endometrium is called as the implantation. Here you can see the implantation where the blastocyst is attached here. When the embryoblast develops into the fetus, trophoblast provides the nutrition to the embryo. Illi here this inner cell mass, so here embryoblast which is also called as idenagate, this will develop into a embryo. This is called as inner cell mass or embryoblast that will develop into an embryo, and this outer layer that provides the nutrition for this developing embryo. Then, but as embryo grows, the simple nutritive system becomes insufficient for a placenta develops. So this simple cells, they are not enough to provide the nutrition for the developing embryo. So in the initial stage only it is enough, but when the embryo develops, that is not enough for the embryo. So the special structure that develops, that is called as the placenta. So that is very important structure that help for the nutrition, respiration and the excretion process in the embryo, excretion process of the embryo. Let us see the structure of the placenta. So this is the post fertilization event. So here how the blastocyst attached to the uterus, uterine wall. So here you can see the inner cell mass. And pregnancy and the embryonic development. So after the implantation, the finger-like projections appear on the trophoblast called chronic villi, which are surrounded by the uterine tissue and the maternal blood. So here you can see the chronic villi. The chronic villi and the uterine tissue become interdigitated with each other and jointly form the structural and functional unit between the developing embryo and the maternal body, that is called as the placenta. So what is placenta, how it is formed, that is also very important. Yes, this is the placental villi, the chronic villi and the uterine tissue that will that will form the structure in between the fetus and the mother. So that is called as the placenta. Okay, so this is the developing embryo. Then, so formation of the fetal membranes. Here, the embryo develops 4 types of fetal membranes, that is yolk sac, allantosis, amnion and the chorion. And trophoblast cells proliferate and produces the chorion, allantosis and the yolk sac layer. But the yolk sac, that is vestigial. Embryoblast cells proliferate and form the 3 germ layers: ectoderm, mesoderm and the endoderm. So in the allantosis is a small vascular sac meant for the collecting nitrogenous waste, allantosis layer. And this amnion is the thin protective membrane which surrounds the embryo and the amniotic cavity. So amniotic fluid ಏನಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, so which provides, that is the aqueous medium, so that provides the that act as a shock absorber, so which protect the baby. So that is the protective layer, amnion layer. So that contains the amniotic cavity which is filled with the amniotic fluid. Okay. So these are the protective layer formed around the developing embryo. So here yolk sac that is not functional in the human beings. Okay. So that is non-functional, and the vestigial yolk sac that is not present in the human beings. Allantosis and the amnion layer, so and the chorion layer, so they are present in the human beings. And the period of development between the fertilization and the pregnancy, birth is called as the pregnancy. Okay, so after the fertilization, how the till the birth, that period is called as the pregnancy. That is also called as the gestation period, that is 9 months or 280 days. What is the gestation period in human beings? That is 280 days. Okay, so it is different in different organisms, but in human beings that is the 280 days. Hormones for the maintenance of the pregnancy. So estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, prolactin, and thyroxine hormones. These hormones are required for the maintenance of the pregnancy. So then, what is the structure of the placenta? So this is the placenta. So here you can see how it is connected to the baby. So this is the placenta. It is the organic connection between the developing fetus and the uterine wall of the mother for physiological exchange of the substances, which provide the important things for the developing embryo, and also helps for the removal of the some waste materials from the embryo. As the whole structure is flat, cake, or large disc, it is called as the metadiscoidal. So this shape, so that is the metadiscoidal shape. The embryo is attached to the disc by the tube called umbilical cord. So this, where the placenta and the embryo which are attached, that is called as the umbilical cord. The fetal part of the placenta is produced into a number of finger-like villi called chronic villi, which penetrate into the uterine wall. So which chronic villi which penetrate into the uterine wall. The chronic villi actually bath in the mother's blood of the uterus, hence placenta is called as the hemochorial. So this is how the placenta, the structure of the placenta, okay, how it is attached to the mother, sorry, developing embryo and the uterus. And what are the functions of the placenta? Here, the transportation of nutrients like amino acids, monosugars, vitamins from the maternal blood to the fetal blood, from the mother's body to the to the developing embryo. Then diffusion of gases and stores the glycogen and acts as a lever. So the carbon dioxide or some nitrogenous waste that is also removed through this placenta to the maternal blood. It acts also as an endocrine gland as it secretes the certain hormones. So which are the hormones secreted by the placenta? Yes, these are the hormones secreted by the placenta. Progesterone, so maintains the pregnancy, hence known as the pregnancy hormone. Human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG hormone, that is also very important. What is the function of the placenta and the hormones, that is which stimulate the corpus luteum to secrete the progesterone. And human placental lactation, it stimulates the milk secretion by the mammary glands. And the relaxin, which helps in the dilation of the uterus during the parturition, during the delivery of the baby, which is very helpful. And one more thing, that is the human chorionic somatotropin, which promote the growth of the embryo. That is the post fertilization events that takes place in the human body. And these are the hormones: progesterone, human chorionic gonadotropin, human placental lactogen, relaxin, HCS. So these are the hormones released by the placenta. Then development of the embryo. So you know that around 9 months, the pregnancy will last for 9 months, which is divided into 3 trimesters. So in the beginning, in the human beings, after 1 month of the pregnancy, the embryo's heart is formed. So heart is formed after 1 month of the pregnancy. The first sign, very important. The first sign of growing fetus may be noticed by listening to the heart sound carefully through the stethoscope. Okay. By the end of the second month of the pregnancy, the fetus develops limbs and the digits. Second month means that is the 8th week of the pregnancy. Then by the end of the 12 weeks means 3 months, first trimester which is called, most major organ systems are formed. For example, the limbs, external genitalia organs are developed, external genital organs are developed. So this is very important for your CET. Okay, so these all things, when the heart is formed, then the fetus, when it develops the in which month which develops the limbs and the digits, and by the end of 12 weeks here which forms the limbs and external genital organs are developed. Then the first movement of the fetus and appearance of hair on the head are usually observed during the 5th month. Very important. The first movements of the fetus and appearance of the hair on the head, it is usually observed on the 5th month. And by the end of about 24 weeks, that is the second 6 months, 24 weeks means 6 months, the body is covered with fine hair, eyelids separate and eyelashes are formed. So ನೋಡಿ ಯಾವ ಮಂತ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೇನ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಎಂಬ್ರಿಯೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೇನ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಮೂಮೆಂಟ್ ಯಾವಾಗ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದೀಸ್ ಆಲ್ ಆರ್ ವೆರಿ ವೆರಿ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ಯುವರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್. ಇದನ್ನ ರಿಪೀಟೆಡ್ ಆಗಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ CET ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. By the end of 9 months, the pregnancy of the fetus, by the pregnancy, the fetus is fully developed and ready for the delivery. So 24 weeks, that is so what happens, the body is covered with fine hair, eyelids separate and eyelashes are formed. So first movement and the appearance of the hair, that is end of the 5th month, so during the 5th month. Then 12 week pregnancy, so limbs and the genital organs are developed. Then by the end of the 2nd month of the pregnancy, fetus develops the limbs and the digits. Okay, so that is very important. Then the last topic, that is the yes, here you can see 5th week, brain and heart develops. 2nd months, and then the 2nd month possess the limbs and finger toes and the well formed face. By the end of 6 months possesses hair and nails. Last topic of this chapter, that is the parturition, that is nothing but the delivery of the baby. So how it occurs, the average duration of human pregnancy is about 9 months, which is called as a gestation period. What is gestation? And vigorous contraction of the uterus ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, contract ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. So by the end of the pregnancy causes the expulsion of the baby. The baby is delivered, that is called as the parturition or childbirth. So this is the parturition that is called as a complex neuroendocrine mechanism. So why it is called as the neuroendocrine mechanism? Why it is called as the neuroendocrine mechanism? Because the signals for the parturition, now the baby is developed, now it should be delivered from the mother's body. So that is originated from the fully developed fetus and the placenta, which induce the mild contraction called the fetal ejection reflex. The signals that is originate from the fully developed fetus and the placenta, which induces the mild uterine contraction. So that is called as the fetal ejection reflex. And this triggers the oxytocin from the maternal pituitary, mother body, so that releases the oxytocin from the pituitary gland, and oxytocin that acts on the uterine muscle. So that acts on the uterine muscle, so that cause the stronger contraction, which stimulates the further secretion of the ಆಕ್ಸಿಟೋಸಿನ್. ಏನಾಗತ್ತೆ ನೋಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ, ಡೆವಲಪ್ಡ್ ಎಂಬ್ರಿಯೋ ಅಂಡ್ ಪ್ಲಸೆಂಟಾ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಮೈಲ್ಡ್ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಅನ್ನ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಫೀಟಲ್ ಇಜೆಕ್ಷನ್ ರಿಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೀತಾರೆ. ದಟ್ ಫೀಟಲ್ ಇಜೆಕ್ಷನ್ ರಿಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಟ್ರಿಗರ್ಸ್ ದ ಪಿಟ್ಯುಟರಿ, ಮದರ್ಸ್ ಪಿಟ್ಯುಟರಿ ಗ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, ಆಕ್ಸಿಟೋಸಿನ್ ಸೀಕ್ರೆಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಆಕ್ಸಿಟೋಸಿನ್ ದಟ್ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ದ contraction, uterine contraction in the more uterine contraction that releases that is responsible for the expulsion of the baby from the uterus. So this is how the parturition occurs, and which is called as the complex neuroendocrine mechanism. So the stimulatory reflex between the uterine contraction and the oxytocin secretion continues, resulting in the stronger and the stronger contraction. This leads to the expulsion of the baby out of the uterus through the birth canal, called as the parturition. Soon after the infant is delivered, the placenta also expelled out through the uterus. So the placenta also removed from the uterus. Yes, this is how the how the baby is delivered from the body. So the lactation. What is lactation? The mammary glands of the female undergo the differentiation during the pregnancy and start producing the milk towards the end of the pregnancy by the process called as the lactation. This helps the mother feeding the newborn, and the milk produced during the initial few days of the lactation is called as the colostrum, which contains several antibodies absolutely essential to develop the resistance for the newborn babies. So that is the lactation period. So yes, so this is how the post-fertilization events and the parturition takes place in the human body. Okay, so this is about the human reproduction. So briefly we have studied about the human reproduction chapter. If you have any doubts, you can write down in the chat box. Okay, or you can ask in the next class also. Yes, thank you dear students. We'll continue in the next class.